Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed the janitor's car down the gleaming marble corridor of Meridian Financial Tower. The weight of exhaustion pressed against his shoulders, not just from the 12-hour shift that was finally ending, but from the constant worry that gnawed at his chest. In the employee break room sat his 8-year-old son Tommy, quietly coloring in a worn activity book, waiting for Dad to finish work. "Again, I'm so sorry, buddy," Marcus whispered under his breath. The same apology he'd been carrying for months. Ever since Sarah left, every day felt like walking a tightrope between keeping food on the table and being the father Tommy deserved. The after-school program had lost its funding, and babysitters cost more than Marcus made in half a day. So Tommy spent his afternoons in break rooms and supply closets. As invisible as his father tried to be, Marcus had perfected the art of invisibility in this gleaming tower of wealth and power. "Keep your head down, do your job, don't make waves." The executives in their $1,000 suits barely registered his existence as they swept past, talking in numbers that represented more money than Marcus would see in a lifetime. He was okay with that. Invisible meant safe, invisible meant employed. But 8-year-old boys weren't built for invisibility. As Marcus rounded the corner toward the executive floor, his blood ran cold. There, sitting cross-legged on the pristine white leather couch in the executive waiting area, was Tommy, and next to him sat Victoria Steele, the CEO whose reputation for ruthlessness was whispered about in every corner of the building. "Tommy, no." Marcus dropped his mop and rushed forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm so sorry, Miss Steele." He knows he's not supposed to toy at Tommy. "Come here right now." Tommy looked up with those wide brown eyes that mirrored his mother's, confusion flickering across his small face. "But Dad, she said it was okay. We're reading together." Marcus felt his world tilting. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading since he'd started bringing Tommy to work. He'd be fired, blacklisted, unable to find another job that would let him keep his son close. The carefully constructed house of cards that was their life was about to come crashing down. "Sir, please don't panic," Victoria Steele said, her voice carrying the crisp authority that commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. Marcus braced himself for the cutting words, the security call, the humiliation. Instead, she turned to Tommy with something Marcus had never seen before, a gentle smile. "Let him stay." The words hung in the air like impossibilities. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Ma'am, I said let him stay." Victoria's steel gray eyes met Marcus's, and for a moment, he saw something crack in her famously impenetrable facade. "We were just getting to the good part of the story." Marcus stood frozen, clutching the handle of his abandoned mop cart. This had to be some kind of test, some elaborate way of making his firing more painful. Victoria Steele didn't do kindness. The woman who'd built Meridian Financial from a small investment firm into a Wall Street powerhouse didn't pause her day to read to Janitor's kids. "Dad, look." Tommy held up a hardcover book that Marcus recognized from the waiting room's carefully curated selection. Miss Victoria was reading Where the Wild Things Are with all the different voices. "She does Max way better than you do." A laugh escaped Victoria's lips, a genuine and startling, "Well, I've had more practice with monsters, I suppose." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. When was the last time he'd seen Tommy this animated, this happy? The boy had been so quiet lately, so careful not to be a burden. Watching him light up as Victoria made roaring sounds for the wild things felt like watching the sun break through storm clouds. "Ma'am, I need to get him out of your hair," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know you have important meetings." "My 4 o'clock cancelled," Victoria interrupted, turning a page. "And frankly, this is the most interesting conversation I've had all day." "Did you know your son wants to be an astronaut and a dinosaur scientist?" Simultaneously, Tommy giggled, a sound that made Marcus's chest ache with love and worry in equal measure. "Dad says I can be anything I want if I work hard enough." Victoria's gaze flicked to Marcus, something unreadable passing across her features. "Your father is absolutely right." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus watched in stunned silence as the most feared woman in corporate America sat on her waiting room floor, helping his son build a tower out of magazines and discussing the finer points of space exploration. She listened as Tommy explained his theory about dinosaurs living on Mars, nodding seriously as if he were presenting to the board of directors. "You know," Victoria said as she handed Tommy another magazine for his tower, "I have a daughter about your age. Emma. She's with her nanny right now, probably doing homework and wishing she could build magazine towers instead." "Does she like dinosaurs?" Tommy asked hopefully. "She loves them. Maybe you two could be dinosaur scientists together someday." Marcus watched his son's face transform with joy and felt something shift in his chest. This woman, this powerful, intimidating woman, was giving his boy something precious: hope, dreams that felt achievable instead of impossible. "Mr." Victoria looked up at Marcus, and he realized she was asking for his name. After 6 months of cleaning her office, she was asking for his name. "Rodriguez," he managed. "Marcus Rodriguez." "Mr. Rodriguez, Tommy mentioned he spends his afternoons here while you work." Heat flooded Marcus's cheeks. Here it comes, he thought, the lecture about inappropriate workplace behavior, about keeping his personal life separate. "Yes, ma'am, I know it's not ideal, but his after-school program lost funding, and I can't afford a—" "What if I told you there might be another option?" Marcus's breath caught. "Ma'am?" Victoria stood, smoothing her pencil skirt, but her voice remained gentle. "We have an employee child care center on the 15th floor. It's been underutilized lately." Tommy could spend his afternoons there. Homework help, activities, other kids to play with. The world seemed to tilt again, but this time toward something that looked impossibly like hope. "I couldn't afford a—" "It's a company benefit," Victoria said firmly, "available to all employees who need it." Marcus knew there was no such benefit. He'd read every page of the employee handbook, searching desperately for options. But as he looked at Victoria Steele, he really looked at her, he saw something he'd never expected. Loneliness, recognition, the understanding of someone who knew what it meant to balance impossible choices. "Why?" he whispered. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching Tommy carefully balance the last magazine on his tower. "Because 17 years ago, I was a single mother working 3 jobs, and no one ever said let her stay to me. Because Tommy reminds me that wonder still exists in this world. And because—" She paused, vulnerability flickering across her features. "Because I've spent so many years building walls that I'd forgotten what it felt like to simply sit on the floor and read a story." Tommy's magazine tower toppled, and he laughed, pure and joyful and completely unaware that his life had just changed. Victoria laughed too, and Marcus realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Not a business transaction or a corporate gesture, but a moment of genuine human connection. "There's one condition," Victoria added, her CEO mask sliding back into place with a small smile. "Tommy has to promise to tell me more about those dinosaurs on Mars." "That's the kind of innovative thinking we need around here, I promise," Tommy declared solemnly, then threw his arms around Victoria's waist in an impulsive hug that made her freeze for just a moment before her arms came up to hug him back. As Marcus gathered Tommy's coloring supplies, his hands shaking with gratitude and disbelief, he caught Victoria watching them. "Thank you," he said, the words entirely inadequate for what she'd just given Emma: dignity, hope, a future that looked brighter than anything he dared imagine. "Thank you," she replied quietly. "Sometimes we all need to be reminded of what really matters." Walking toward the elevator, Tommy's small hand in his, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months, the lightness of possibility. Behind them, Victoria Steele stood in her designer heels and business suit, but for just a moment, she'd been something more powerful than any CEO. She'd been human, and in choosing to see Emma really see Emma, she'd reminded Marcus that invisibility was just another wall that could be torn down by the simple act of kindness. Tomorrow, Tommy would have a place to belong, and Marcus would go to work knowing that sometimes, the most unexpected people become guardian angels, wearing power suits and carrying briefcases full of second chances.